time has come. Onward, mighty steed! We have an army of Bretonnians to paint! Come on, Brian, I want to paint some knight. Let's go. Come on. Yo. If you're wondering if I'm regretting doing that intro, no, the only regret I have is that I'm not wearing an actual knight helm. Those things are bloody expensive. So, my dear friends, Warhammer the Old World has finally arrived, and every miniature content creators on YouTube have received their core box set, either be the Bretonnians one or the Tomb Kings ones. Except me. I haven't received my Bretonnian core box set, Games Workshop. Bloody peasants always stealing from the noble. But don't worry, my friend, don't mistake me for a dwarf because I hold no grudges. Instead, I'm going to behave like the noble and chivalrous knight that I would like to be, and I'm going to say to you that I don't need, at the moment, the Bretonnian core box set, because I have my own. Which is this one, directly from Warhammer Fantasy 5th edition, the Bretonnian Hunting Party. A box that is way more valuable than the core box set for the Bretonnians of Warhammer the Old World, but it does have way less models, unfortunately. And I decided that this might well be the very first step for me to get into the Old World with my Bretonnians. But I'm not going to paint this box yet in this video. I'm going to show you this box in part 2, because I thought that what a better way to start a Bretonnian army if not with a noble on top of a mighty hippogriff. So, my dear friends, in this video I'm going to paint him, Louen Leoncoeur, King of Bretonnia, also from 5th edition, which in the time frame of the Old War he doesn't exist, he wasn't even born. But fortunately in the Bretonnian Arcane Journal or Forces of Fantasy, I don't remember which one of the two is the one with the Bretonnia, maybe the Forces of Fantasy, there are rules for a duke on top of a hippogriff, so I'm going to paint this model and use it as a duke on a barded hippogriff, so I think this is incredibly cool. So, my dear friends, let's go on the hobby table so that I can show you how I painted Louen Leoncoeur, the King of Bretonnia, the king that will be, or was. All of the paints that I have used are down in the description if you're curious to see what paints I use. And let us begin. First of all, let's take a look at the model inside the box. This model, as old as it is, with its outdated sculpt, it's still an amazing piece in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, it's a little bit silly when compared to more recent and technically superior minis of the last years, but keep in mind that this was the best top quality of that time, and I think it's an incredible, amazing and charming piece of miniature history that I bet will look extremely cool on the table. The model is cast in metal and is divided into 10 pieces, 4 for the knight and 6 for the hippogriff. There is also a blue paper flag with various yellow lily flowers, or fleurs de lis. Sorry, French speaker, this is the best I can do with my French pronunciation. Inside the box, there is, of course, the square base for this model, a 40 by 40 millimeter square base, which, by the standard of the Old World, is too small, because hippogriffs are now on a 50 by 50 millimeter one. Thankfully. So now I won't have to worry about a model tipping over and falling around the table. After heavily filing down the model, gluing it together with some super strong cyanoacrylate glue and pinning it to the base, I've primed it with white and grey primer. I decided to sub-assemble the model by keeping the knight and his shield separated from the hippogriff to make it easier for me to paint them. I decided to start with the knight by base coating the armor, the lance handle and the shield. The reason is that this way I can see what parts needed to be painted in a metallic color, and also because I wasn't really sure what color to use to paint the tunic, the cape and the lance. As iconic as the paint job on the box is, I always prefer to do my thing, even by just lightly modifying it. So in the end, I decided to replicate, to an extent, the original scheme represented on the box art. So I've painted the tunic in red, and I divided the cape into 4 parts, by painting the bottom left and the top right of it in red, and the top left and bottom right in blue. Instinctively, I think that most hobbyists that would paint something like this would use some masking tape to be sure to paint as straight as possible, but unless it's a very flat surface, I assure you that it's going to be more of a struggle than a hack, so just go with the flow, I guess. I wasn't sure about the lens of the knight. I really liked the white and red spiral pattern painted in the box art, but I ended up painting it in a uniform and sober black color. I thought that since it's going to be decorated with the flag, it's going to look good anyway, and if I didn't like it, I could always repaint it later. The knight's tiny cape on the back of the elm, I tried to Google it and I didn't find the name for this thing, so please write it in the comments because I need to know how this thing is called. Was originally painted in green and white, divided into squares. But I wanted to use a different color, so I opted for a nice and warm yellow. The ornament on top of the elm, an amazing winged roaring lion, is one of the most beautiful decorations I have ever seen on a Bretonnian knight. It's easily my favorite across the entire range of miniatures for this faction. I pictured the wing of this lion in white, so to make it sure that I ended up with a uniform and bright white color, I started by painting them in a very light gray. After that, I went on with a couple of coats of pure white color, and the end result was more than satisfying. I then realized that this model needed some purple on it, and what better place to paint purple if not on top of the yellow fabric on the back of the elm I've painted before. I painted it in a kind of a double semicircle, like a pair of purple butt cheeks, to give it a more visual interest. The last details that needed to be painted were the fur underneath the cape. I used this occasion to experiment a little bit, trying to understand what kind of color I should use for the hippogriff, and the saddle and leather parts of the knight, which I decided to paint in a warm dark brown. And finally, the golden parts of the armor, like the lion elm ornament, the elbow and knee guards, the sword guard, the lance's pointy bit, and, most importantly, the radiant grail on the shield. Now that our knight is completely base-coated, it's time to focus on the hippogriff. For this mighty beast color scheme, I was completely and utterly overwhelmed by all the possibility that I had in my mind. I really couldn't decide what kind of color scheme to paint. Do I replicate the one on the box art with those beautiful tiger-like legs? Do I try to do something more classic, drawing inspiration from real birds in our world? Or something in between, like a flamboyant and majestic peacock or a flamingo? As tempted as I was to paint it as a giant and angry peacock, I was afraid of going overboard with it, making more of a mess than anything. So, in the end, I opted for a more classic color scheme, taking inspiration from the beautiful bald eagle. As you can see, I painted the feathers in various tones of beige and browns, leaving the head and the outermost part of the wings in white. I've also painted the beak by mixing a little bit of orange and yellow in a 2-to-8 parts, and the tongue of the beast by blending magenta and blue together. Speaking of blending, I've also tried to do that with the fur of the hippogriff's body. My idea was to create a natural transition from a light beige on the center of the body to a more dark brown on the outer parts of the body, on the tail and the legs, as if to pick up the color scheme of the wings, giving the model a more natural appearance. To increase the blending effect, I have also dry brushed the feathers on the wings with some lighter brown and beige colors, giving also a more three-dimensional appearance to the model. The best way to do this technique, in my opinion, is to use some cheap makeup brushes due to their softness that make it easier to apply the color in a more uniform way. I wanted the royal harness of the hippogriff to match the tunic of the knight, so I used the same red color that I used before, paired with a metallic gold paint for the studs and the golden lily flowers scattered around it. The last details that I painted were the eyes, the hooves and the back legs, and the point of the beak. All have been painted in black. The black paint on the beak has been dry brushed to blend it better with the yellowish orange color of this part. Next is going to be tedious, but it will make the model look even better. It's highlight time. By highlighting, I mean that I'm painting some thin lines over the edges of the model with a brighter version of that color, obtained by mixing a little bit of white or ivory with it. Kinda like a dry brush, but more careful and thoughtful. This will enhance the look of the model by simulating light hitting those parts, creating a pleasant contrast between the outer edges and the darkest inner parts of the miniature. The only parts where I'm not using this technique are the metallic bits. You'll see why in a moment. Next up is to shade the model. I always like this part because when I'm doing it, it gives me the feeling that everything that I have done till now is coming together and makes perfect sense. Basically, I'm applying the washes all over the model by mixing them with some water in a 5:5 ratio, to the point that they start to behave almost like a glaze. This will further blend the colors together, and at the same time will drastically enhance the contrast between the outermost and brightest part of the model with the innermost dark recesses. Needless to say that every wash that I'm using is going to match the color on which I'm applying it. The very last touch to make this model look extremely regal and glorious, as a noble knight should be, is to polish the armor. I want my knights to look resplendent on the battlefield, so what I'm doing is to repaint the steel and gold part with a small brush, being careful to avoid all the nooks and crannies where the shades settled. I've also done the same thing, but with a bone color, to the teeth and claws of the Hippogriff, since they were looking a little bit too dark for me. Of course, a knight on his mighty steed need a battlefield to perform mighty charges and to fight on. So, after gluing the knight to the Hippogriff, I've painted the rims of the base in black, and then I've applied a good amount of texture paint on it. While I was waiting for the texture paint to dry, I wanted to apply the paper flag on the model's lens, but it turns out that when I tried to slightly bend the flag to make it look more realistic, the paper was too rigid and stiff, and it looked awful. But thankfully for me, I have a nice supply of paper flags to use on my knights, and it happens that I had one that perfectly matched with this model. I simply cut it out of the paper sheet, and after painting the inner edges of the flag with a blue paint, I started to spread some watered-down PVA glue on it. To give the flag more solidity, I've applied a small piece of tin foil on the inside. Then it was a matter of wrapping it around the lens with some more PVA glue. Now, as much as I would have liked to try and freehand the heraldry on the knight's cape, I was really afraid that at this point I would have just ruined it. So I decided to use some decals to quickly but effectively add some heraldry symbol on these parts of the model. Now it was just a matter of washing the dried out texture paint with a dark brown wash, then dry brush it with an ivory color, and flocking the entire base with some small rocks and static grass. And after varnishing the model with a satin transparent paint, finally the glorious king of Bretonnia that will be, or was, is ready to ride on the battlefield with an army of chivalrous knights following him. So, my dear friends, thank you very much. This model was amazing, incredibly fun to build and paint, and also incredibly hard to build and paint because it's completely made out of metal and we don't see a lot of metal models these days. But I think that maybe in the future Games Workshop will reprint, recast this model on a made-to-order on their website, because they have stated that they want to reprint a lot of old models for Bretonnia and also the other faction of Warhammer the Old World. I really hope they do that, because I can see a lot of people wanting this model, and if you go on eBay it costs quite a lot because it's a very vintage old model from 1996, if I remember correctly. I had a lot of fun. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this model, and I would love to see you for part 2, because I'm going to build and paint the Bretonnian hunting party. This marks the start of my Bretonnian army. I am very excited for Warhammer the Old World. For what I've seen, the rules looks like this is the best Warhammer Fantasy Edition. At least this is what I heard. I have to try it, but I have to paint a army of knight before that. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, hopefully. I would also like to deeply thank Utred. At least I hope this is the way that this name is pronounced. He is the amazing artist that have created the beautiful soundtrack that I have used in this video, and I would like to thank him because he gave me the permission to use his music in this video, and he is my favorite dungeon synth artist out there, and I really suggest you listen to his music. I will leave down in the description his Bandcamp website, so go check it out and listen to his music, because it's an amazing soundtrack. It has been an amazing soundtrack for this video, and it really inspired me to paint a lot of Bretonnia, because it's a really medieval Middle Ages kind of music that fits perfectly for the Bretonnian. So thank you, Utred. You will also listen to him in part 2 when I'm going to paint the Bretonnian hunting party. So my friend, let me know down in the comments what you think about this model. Leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Down in the description there are a couple of links, my Instagram and my Patreon if you want to support me, which you don't have to, and also all the paints that I have used in this video. And I think that this is everything that I wanted to say. Hope to see you the next time, my friends. I'm Cory. Ciao, ciao.